This is the Week in Sustainability from Sustain.Life. It's where our team of sustainability experts and practitioners share commentary to keep you up to date on developing stories and news.
Hello and welcome to the Week in Sustainability. My name is Mitch Voss. I'm a senior director here in our sustainability team and excited for this week's topic. This week, we're going to dive into the Verdantix Climate Summit and go over some of the key topics and themes that we saw, as well as some of the takeaways from the event. Probably the biggest theme, or where I want to start, was preparation for updated climate disclosure. We saw quite a few both sessions, panels, and fireside chats, really focusing in on A, climate disclosure, but B, what it's going to mean for organization. We saw a lot of different, both industry leaders, organizations, and others talking about working and being multidisciplinary in their approach to pull together and be prepared for climate disclosure. Everything from thinking about or preparing for everything from SB 253 to CSRD to, again, potential looming SEC regulation and what it's going to mean for your organization. There were quite a few great examples from various organizations that are preparing for these types of disclosures. Audit was certainly a key theme, thinking about what it's going to mean to have your numbers, your report go through a verification process and how you can prepare for that. There was a lot of great advice coming from industry about making sure that when you are, for example, preparing for that assurance or that verification process, that shouldn't be the first time that you're looking at those numbers or looking at the calculations or digging into how the calculations are done. Advice that I think is very top of mind or should be something that organizations are focusing on right now to make sure that, as you're putting your numbers and putting your inventory together for this climate disclosure, you're planning for that process, but B, making sure that you have, for example, things documented when you are working through and pulling those numbers together. One of the examples came from someone in industry talking about the importance of an inventory management plan, that when you're pulling these numbers together, making sure that you document, hey, here's where, here's my data source, here's the calculations that occurred, and ultimately here's what the output was. So that when you are going through that assurance process or that verification process, you have something to lean back on, or it's not you're not thinking about, oh, I have to, look into, or you can basically give the auditor an answer right away. Also, advice came from that session that there's someone in the industry that said, make sure you never lie to an auditor, you never lie to a verifier, because that's one of the worst things that you can do. So making sure that you have those processes, A, documented, B, they're very easily accessible, and C, in a format that your auditor can take and start to work towards verifying very easily. Another really great session that we attended that I think will resonate with this audience too was a session about the pathway to net zero. This was a fireside chat with Jessica Donahue, who's at State Street. She basically really hit on the point of State Street taking an intentional shift away from ESG and that kind of politicized term in some senses to sustainability as a core business concept. I think that's a really great framing and approach. And they basically focused on financing sustainable businesses with concepts of financial sustainability within a sustainable economy. That was a really great approach in our perspective, or in listening to that fireside chat. And I think something that other organizations should take a good think about in terms of, what is the right way to frame your overall program? What is the right way to frame what it is you're showing up or representing yourself as, in a way that, moving potentially away from ESG and towards sustainability as a key or core concept. One of the things that State Street is doing as well is they're focusing on funding the transition rather than divesting as part of their strategy. and something that I think is great for organizations to really focus on beyond just the moving away from potentially called dirty investments or organizations, and instead focusing on making sure that you can enable the transition by working with various organizations to help them decarbonize rather than, um, just moving away from those businesses. Because I think that's the the real great concept of the sustainable economy or sustainable future is that these organizations need to move in the right direction, and rather than just divesting, making sure that you're moving them along their journey in the same way with, for example, the capital you're providing. There's another fireside session that I think was really great in terms of the pathway to net zero series, and something that will likely resonate with organizations that are trying to go down that pathway and look towards net zero. Uh, was one around the challenges that organizations are currently facing in setting these targets and ultimately achieving them. There was a great panelist there, Patrick, who was talking about the struggles that they have with getting, collecting, and looking at accurate or primary data. Some of the advice that came out of that session, I think was great and will resonate with the folks that are trying to go down this pathway as well. But was making sure to get the right stakeholders identified early, and starting to work with them to um, really make sure that you can get full coverage, and knowing when. And one of the quotes that came from that session too, that I think is a great one, is you don't want perfection to get in the way of progress. That making sure that you're first and foremost, you're pushing for that primary data. You're trying to work with your suppliers. You're trying to work with folks within your organization to get the data that you need. But at a certain point, proxy or estimated data can be valuable as well. That you shouldn't shy away from either setting a target or looking to make progress just because you don't have access to data. That there are opportunities to truly push for and make meaningful progress without having full primary data as part of your program. I think that was a key theme, and something we heard from not only that fireside chat and that panel, but through many of the other sessions that we were a part of as well. Making sure that that quote really resonated with me, and I think it's something that folks should really keep in mind, is that perfection should not get in the way of progress for your organization. One of the other key topics, and something that came up a couple of times throughout the 2 days, was around making sure that you're defining accurate boundaries based on and beginning with the end in mind for your program. That you set the boundaries as part of your inventory, for example, that truly allow for and make sure that you're making meaningful progress towards decarbonization that makes sense for your organization. And G-Shape Protocol does define a lot of that in terms of where those boundaries do need to be set. And there are things like, you can take there was an example about operational control, that yes, if you have operational control, it does need to be included. But there are, examples where there may be flexibility in that, and how that is accounted for in your inventory can certainly impact what you need to, or what you can do in terms of decarbonization. The specific example I was thinking of was, there was a member that was talking about how they currently struggle with, for example, leased spaces. So, you have the opportunity to include your leased spaces in scope 1 and 2. However, there are, and again, based on your operational control, if you are taking that approach, there's also the financial control approach. But based on how they had defined the operational control, they had the opportunity to put it into their scope 3 emissions. However, based on their specific business, it made a lot more sense to include it in their scope 1 and 2, because they had enough operational control to inform or start to look at things, for example, like renewable energy, where that made a lot more sense to include it in scope 1 and 2, because it could become a key cornerstone of a decarbonization roadmap. That it made more sense to do that rather than pushing it off into scope 3, where they would have less control of, or less opportunity to really decarbonize. One more concept that came up during a couple of sessions that I think is a really great one as well, was around this idea of, call it corporate incentives, or how you can really move the needle with, for example, executive leadership or various stakeholders in an organization. And I heard it during 2 sessions, was the idea of a sustainability linked loan. That if, for example, you have executive compensation tied to your sustainability plan and your decarbonization roadmap, for example, it can really move the needle that, making sure that it is top of mind for everyone across the organization. It's a really great way to make sure that the needs or the roadmap or the plans that you've put in place for your sustainability team really do come from the top down and are pushed throughout the organization and become critical to the success of the program. There's another panelist that spoke and a few key concepts that really resonated with me was Kristen Sullivan. One of the quotes was absent transparency is challenging to inform decision making. And I think that's a great concept or a great thing to think about within, for example, your own organization. That absent transparency or basically it being transparent without, fully being backed or being grounded in what is being shared doesn't allow you to make informed decisions. It doesn't allow you to really stand behind what your roadmap or what your program is going to look like. Kristen also had a few really great points about the motivation for SEC and that act in federal legislation to prevent fragmented state level requirements. What we saw come out of California was one of those examples that having that at a federal level is something that it is really a concept a lot of, I think, sustainability experts are looking for, because having that being fragmented and having, your organization working in many different states in the US can make it really challenging. It would make it very difficult to comply with very fragmented requirements, and standardizing on that and then coming from the federal level is something that a lot of folks are really looking for. One final thought or one final concept that came from Kristen was using regulation as a catalyst for business transformation. That yes, the reporting is important. It's coming up more and more as a requirement, both, again, CSRD, SB 253 and other areas. It's something that you, as an organization, those that are going to have to comply with it, they are going to have to start to pull those numbers and put them together. But it also gives you the opportunity to really put in a robust program and start to build in true business transformation towards a more sustainable organization, sustainable economy overall. That it shouldn't just, for some organizations, it shouldn't just be reporting the numbers, that it will and can be an opportunity for you to truly build sustainability and decarbonization throughout your organization. That if you are that sustainability person within your organization, that this can be the opportunity to really highlight and push for the importance within your business. So those are the key concepts that came from the Verdantix Climate Summit this week. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Sustain.Life is the leading and most comprehensive sustainability software on the market. To learn how we can help your company measure its emissions and take climate action, go to Sustain.Life. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this show on our YouTube channel or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.